Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange. Today I am Olaoluwa Awe. Today is what I like to call a fearless Friday, a day that reminds me that I can do anything and everything. And it reminds me to also chase my dreams. Ayo Jimmy, good morning.
A very good morning to you. Good morning, viewers, and thank you for joining us on Early Exchange today. Of course, it is a fearless Friday. You are fearless when you do the right things at the right time. And so today on this show, we're taking a look at three critical things among other areas of endeavor. Number one, we look at the public service reforms and how to reposition them. What have been the efforts of the federal government of Nigeria to reform the public service in the last couple of years and up to today? That is number one. Then we take a look at the incidents of building collapse that has ravaged the country over the years. We are speaking to professionals who are meant to, play their own role in safeguarding the country and ensuring that we don't have buildings collapsing on us. And of course, we look at stewardship in governance. These and many more are part of the package today. It is a bumper package. And we'll go first and foremost to the newsroom where Blessing Eichi is standing by to bring us latest updates in the world of news. Good morning, Blessing. How are you?
I am fine, Ayer. Elurula.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to Morning News Updates. I am Blessing Eichi. I will be bringing you the latest update from around the world as usual. Stay tuned. Our first story on the Morning News Update comes from Nigeria, where the Presidential Committee on Tax Policy and Fiscal Reforms has recommended that the Nigeria Customs Service and 62 other ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs of the federal government, should no longer directly collect revenue. Instead, the committee suggests that the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, should handle revenue collection for these MDAs. The chairman of the committee, Taiwo Oyedele, emphasized that Nigeria's revenue collection from taxes is low, while the cost of collection is high due to the involvement of various agencies. He cited examples like Customs and the Nigeria Communications Commission, NCC, that should concentrate on their primary functions while leaving revenue collection to a central agency. This would lead to greater transparency and accountability in money management. Oyedele also highlighted a significant tax gap of around 20 trillion naira in Nigeria, mainly due to non-compliance among the middle class and elites. The committee intends to bring previously unaccounted revenue into the tax net, simplify the tax system, and increase the overall revenue collection. The House of Representatives in Nigeria has issued an order for the arrest of Aruna Kulu, a former desk officer responsible for Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System, IPPIS, at the Federal Character Commission, FCC. Kulu is facing allegations of involvement in job racketeering. The order was given by the chairman of the ad hoc committee investigating personnel recruitment, mismanagement, employment racketeering, and related matters, Yusuf Gadi. Kulu had been summoned to appear before the committee to address the allegations, but he did not comply. The committee has also set a deadline of Monday, August 14, 2023 for the Asset Management Company of Nigeria, AMCON, and other agencies that have failed to respond to the committee's call for appearance. And moving now to another story, the SocioEconomic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has announced its intention to file a lawsuit against Senate President Godswill Akpabio regarding the disbursement of what he said was holiday allowances to senators by the clerk of the National Assembly. Although Senator Akpabio immediately retracted the holiday allowance statement made during a recent plenary session, the comment still generated widespread reactions. The specifics of SERAP's lawsuit, including the parties involved and the exact charges, have not been disclosed, but the group, in a statement on its official handle, questioned the alleged payment at a time many Nigerians struggle economically and asked government to cut governance costs. Meanwhile, the lawmaker representing the FCT in the Nigeria Senate, Ireti Kingwe, while addressing the controversy, said she didn't receive any unusual allowance, expressing uncertainty about what Senator Akpabio was referring to. She acknowledged the assumption that lawmakers might have received payment, but suggested they were not beyond what they were supposed to receive as statutory entitlement. Regarding concerns about high governance costs and criticism of senators' high salaries, Kingibe admitted her limitations in making changes and disclosed she intends to allocate any extra funds towards funding her constituency offices and develop their initiatives. The National Emergency Management Agency NEMA issued a warning to residents of flood-prone areas in Adamawa, urging them to relocate to safer locations. The head of operations for NEMA's Adamawa field office, Mr. Ladan Ayuba, emphasized that the 2023 annual flood outlook has predicted potential flooding in 5 out of the 21 local government areas in the state. These areas include Demsa, Fufuri, Numa, Yola South, and Yola North. Ayuba urged all the local councils to take proactive measures to mitigate flooding and prevent disasters. He specifically pointed out that Damari community in Gere local government area as a safer option for resettlement and shelter. Ayuba emphasized the importance of avoiding construction in waterways and keeping drains clear to ensure the smooth flow of water. He also highlighted that unexpected areas like Song and Madagal have been affected by floods in the past, underscoring that disasters do not discriminate based on predictions. We'll take a break before continuing with the morning news update. Stay tuned. Away from Nigeria, local militias engaged in fighting against government forces in Ethiopia's Amhara region have pulled back from major cities, bringing a relative calm to Bahir Dar and Gondar, the region's 2 largest cities. The retreat follows a week of violence in the area. The Ethiopian government has established a command post to oversee a state of emergency declared in response to the clashes, which includes implementing a nighttime curfew in 6 cities and towns, as well as banning the carrying of weapons in public demonstrations. The restoration of relative calm has allowed for the burials of civilians killed in the violence in Bahir Dar. Human Rights Watch HRW has called on the international community to pressure the Ethiopian government to protect civilians as they accuse the authorities of responding to the violence with increased repression. ECOWAS leaders have called for the swift deployment of the regional standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger following a recent military coup. The leaders said all efforts made to dialogue with Niger Republic military junta have been defiantly rejected by the coup leaders, and they condemned the continuous detention of President Mohamed Bazoum and his family members. President Omar Aliou Touré delivered a directive at the ECOWAS extraordinary meeting in Abuja yesterday, emphasizing the need to stabilize the region. It also called on the African Union, AU, partner countries and institutions to support the resolution taken by the sub-regional body. The announcement drew international attention, with Western leaders expressing support for ECOWAS efforts despite concerns of potential regional instability. Meanwhile, Niger's military junta had on Thursday announced a new government, naming Ali Mohamed Lamine Zain Prime Minister to lead over 21 new ministers, forming the new cabinet. Moving now to the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates UAE is currently experiencing continued heavy rainfall, prompting the National Center of Meteorology to issue orange and yellow alerts, cautioning residents about unstable weather conditions. The orange alert signifies potentially hazardous weather event, with the public advised to follow local authorities' guidance. Videos shared on social media depict flooded roads and submerged cars in the eastern part of the country, along with torrential downpours affecting various areas, including Ras Al Khaimah. Authorities have warned against venturing into valleys and waterflow areas, while the Ministry of Interior emphasizes adhering to official water updates and instructions. Motorists are urged to ensure vehicle safety and avoid speeding during rainy conditions. A new law is in effect for cross-country drivers traveling from UAE to Kuwait. Non-Kuwaiti vehicle drivers must now settle any traffic fines before departing the country. Kuwait's Ministry of Interior has implemented this policy, preventing vehicles with astounding violations from leaving Kuwait. Collection points are established at border crossings to facilitate fine payments. The move is in accordance with the directives of Kuwait's first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior. Still in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, the Public Investment Fund (PIF), has launched SRJ Sports Investments, a new company aimed at attracting a major global sporting event to the kingdom. With over $620 billion in assets, PIF intends to invest in acquiring sports event intellectual property, commercial rights for popular competitions, and hosting significant global sports events in Saudi Arabia. The move aligns with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 reform agenda, focusing on sports and entertainment to rebrand the nation as a global business and tourism destination. The kingdom has attracted football stars like Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Jordan Henderson, and Sadio Mane, bolstering its sports industry and image. Additionally, Saudi Arabia's financial influence extends to golf, hosting a Formula One Grand Prix and targeting tennis organizations like ATP and WTA. This strategic push showcases Saudi Arabia's significant investment in sports, leveraging its economic prowess to become a leading player in the global sporting landscape. Now we move to India. Gig workers in India have achieved a significant victory in their campaign for labor rights and improved working conditions. The country has a substantial number of gig workers, estimated at over 7 million, who have been advocating for their rights within a workforce not covered by traditional labor laws. But the state of Rajasthan has now passed the Rajasthan Platform-Based Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Act 2023, which grants social security benefits to platform-based gig workers. The law establishes a social security fund funded by a welfare tax on transactions made through relevant apps such as food delivery and ride sharing. This is expected to provide gig workers with essential rights like insurance and paid leave, and it also establishes mechanisms for addressing grievances and enforcing regulations. While labor activists praise the law, critics express concerns that it could lead to higher prices for customers, potentially affecting the growth of the gig economy. The waiting list for hospital treatment in England has reached a record high of over 7.5 million people, which is approximately 1 in 7 of the population. The waiting list, which increased by 100,000 in just 1 month, includes routine treatments like hip and knee operations, with factors like strike action by junior doctors contributing to the surge. The waiting list is now over 3 million higher than pre-pandemic levels. More than 383,000 individuals have been waiting for over a year for treatment. The National Health Service, NHS, is also struggling to meet cancer treatment targets, with only 59% of patients starting treatment within 62 days of urgent GP referrals in June. Junior doctors are set to stage a walkout, adding to the pressures faced by the NHS. Still in the UK's biggest mortgage firm, Halifax, is set to sharply cut rates on some of its fixed mortgage deals, potentially easing pressure on some homeowners. The lending will reduce rates by up to 0.71 percentage points from Friday, with a 5-year fixed deal priced at 5.39% from 6.10%. Halifax will cut rates across a range of products with smaller reductions on 2-year fixed deals, some of which are aimed at first-time buyers. Other big mortgage lenders have been lowering rates this week after the latest data on inflation, which measures the rate of price rises, was better than expected. Mortgage costs have risen as the Bank of England has pushed up interest rates in a bid to tame soaring prices. And inflation, which has slowed at 7.9%, remains nearly 4 times higher than the Bank of England's 2% target. But this mortgage court could suggest the Bank of England's interest rate might not stay as high for as long. Where the U.S. is set to prohibit American investment in certain segments of China's high-tech sector, including artificial intelligence (AI), which could further strain relations between the two nations. U.S. companies will also be required to disclose their investment in China's high-tech sectors. This move empowers the U.S. government to scrutinize foreign deals by private companies. While the U.S. claims this measure is targeted narrowly, it is likely to cool economic ties between the world's largest economies. China expressed its disappointment and accused the U.S. of escalating suppression and restrictions. The rules are expected to focus on active investment by private equity, venture capital, and other firms rather than passive portfolio investment. They will enter a public comment period before taking effect, with a goal of enhancing national security rather than hampering economic relations. And the story from the U.S. completes the Money News update for the week. It's been a great week from Monday to Friday, updating you on current happenings, on development, business, and of course, economy. I am Blessing AJ. Let's get back to Olaoluwa and Ayo, who are waiting to give you a great deal this morning. Stay for the rest part of an exchange.
Welcome back to Early Exchange on Souq News, and it's time to really talk further on some of the major developments around the world. Once again, I am Olaoluwa, where Ayojimi is here, and luckily we have Sam Uruwije joining us right about now. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. My pleasure to be here. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Ola.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, we start with the development in Africa. Let's quickly speak on the Niger ECOWAS development. Now, as at yesterday, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has ordered the Chief of Defense Staff Committee to immediately activate its standby force in Niger. The president of ECOWAS, Omar Aliou Touré, gave the order while reading the resolution taken at the extraordinary meeting on the Niger coup in Abuja as at yesterday. For a good number of people on social media, they took that to mean that ECOWAS is invading Niger. They took that as an invasion. What do you make of that?
Well, thank you. I think the commitment that people have been speaking about this crisis, why the military should be on the standby, we explore the ECOWAS head of government to tread carefully, and we have always advocated for a diplomatic option. And I think it's still the best option in spite of the grandstanding from the ECOWAS head of government. I think they have to tread carefully. A military option will not be the best option for conflict resolution mechanism in this regard.
Well, Ayo, the ECOWAS leaders resorted to this option because they claim that all other diplomatic moves have failed. They've sent religious leaders, they've sent, traditional leaders, they've, tried some economic sanctions, and it has not worked. So, at some point, don't you think we have to talk about what will eventually happen if all peace moves fail?
It is still too early for us to say that all diplomatic options have failed. We're talking of options of not more than 2 weeks or thereabouts now. Diplomacy is not a one-day exercise. It takes a lot. For the military junta that took over power in Niger, they did their plan and they had their own objective. You wouldn't expect them to just drop those objectives just because you rally around them for just a number of weeks. It's not possible. These are soldiers in their own right, and soldiers have what is called resoluteness. They believe in a particular, line of action and they stick to it. So I wouldn't say the window is too long for them to still explore diplomatic options. By the way, it is still a standby. We have not really activated war. Of course, a standby is indicative of, okay, we will do everything possible, even if we have to use force. And now, it is important to know that President Tinubu said, if we don't, we, meaning ECOWAS, if we don't do it, no one else will. And what are they doing? They say they want to restore democracy because around the ECOWAS sub-region, it is assumed, it is believed that democracy is the only viable, system of government. This is just what they're trying to say. So, while I want to admit that, okay, calling a standby force, activating it is part of getting ready, it is still a standby, and we can't say we have explored all diplomatic options.
Well,
so,
things are taking a new dimension now. According to reports, the junta is threatening to kill President Bazoum if ECOWAS launches any military attack against the military in the country. Do you think that is going too far?
No, I think the diplomatic option still need to be exploited. The regional body, ECOWAS, must equally look inward. What are the issues? Why the militaries normally oust them from power? What is critical at this moment, you see have what you call autocratic democracy across Africa. So they need to win themselves of those autocratic tendencies that do not deal with good governance. Those are the essential elements. So it's not just sufficient that you're raising a high military command for what are the issues that led to the military intervention in the first issues. Those are the root causes they should try to address. We are not encouraging military intervention in governance, but I think diplomatic option is still the option that is available, and they need to exploit that.
Well, I know that there have been reports and rumors that there may be another world power country, influencing Niger and Nigerians in this case. Is that also a point of focus for ECOWAS, or should they also look that way to look at it if there are other parties involved in this crisis?
they know, really. They know. It's
But
clear.
there have been no major statements on that.
Of course, there is no major statement, but they know. Everybody who has been following politics around the world knows that there are other superpowers behind Niger Republic. With due respect to Niger Republic, what is the size of Niger's military strength against the ECOWAS, allied forces? It makes no sense. But when you know that you have a backing that is probably stronger than even the ECOWAS allied forces, then you begin to sound like, okay, let heaven fall. So much as there is no public pronouncement of the backing of Niger by some other superpowers, we know where this is coming from. Like somebody said, it also said on this show that we're only seeing the face of Niger. We're hearing the voice of Putin. That's what he said here. Sam?
Yes, we would not want to make categorical statements. You always have interest in international politics. What is uppermost in international politics is selective morality. So there may be suspicion that Russia has some influence in what is happening in Niger. But what is key from the perspective of the sub-regional government is for them to exploit every diplomatic window that is possible to resolve this crisis rather than looking at a military option in the long run. Military option in the long run will not be beneficial to any of the parties to this crisis.
Well, I wonder how easy this will be. We are talking about a junta that has appointed a prime minister, a 21 member cabinet. They seem to be moving on with their own plan, and some people would say that if you allow things to, go on and grow, if you allow, something to grow and grow, it becomes more difficult, to tame eventually. But let's see how this goes. I think, apart from speaking to ECOWAS too, it's very important that we speak to the military juntas. A good number of people want to tell ECOWAS how to approach this, but considering the fact that some Nigerians who are fully backing the juntas also have their own hopes, they have their expectations, they have their desires, they have their goals, should we also be speaking to their conscience in this case? What should they be doing right now?
ECOWAS is already speaking to them through tractorial diplomacy option that I talked about earlier. People-to-people diplomacy is the best option to resolve this crisis. So ECOWAS is exploring those options. But to a very large extent, in my view, they should not be grandstanding with the threat of military intervention. They must look inward. What are the challenges to governance within the sub-region? Those are critical elements that they equally need to address to forestall coup juntas not coming into those environments.
Yes, let's quickly move on to something else more here in Nigeria. There's a report that's really got people talking on social media, off social media yesterday, and it is the report that Nigerians will now have to pay 107,500 naira for the International English Language Testing System examination known as the IELTS. And this was announced in a statement by the British Council yesterday. And the United Kingdom requires citizens of any country willing to relocate to the United Kingdom for work or study opportunities to take the IELTS. I think the last time I checked, this examination was about 75,000 naira or thereabouts. But moving from 75,000 naira to 107,500 naira for an examination that has just 2 years validity. Like when you write it, you can only use the results just for 2 years. You know, how does that make you feel, AY?
You really can't blame the UK for setting a price for, you know, examination into their country. The first question is, what are you coming here to do? That's the first question. Now, there are so many talks about the morality of even having us take IELTS in the first place, because we were taught in English language. At least the Anglophone West African countries were taught in English language in the first place. We are speaking English language now. Now, why do I have to still come and write a test to pass English language, to prove that I can speak the language when I was taught and I was certified in English language? That's the one part of the argument. Then you look at why UK may be doing this. Beyond revenue generation, the UK in the last couple of years has faced a lot of migration issues. Population, housing is a problem there. Even people there in the UK can't have access to affordable housing any longer because people are trooping in. It is being joked about that the UK has become Nigeria's annex in a contest. People are rushing down there, maybe because they think, okay, the pasture is greener over there. So when you have issues like that, you have uncontrolled influx of people, and you don't. There is maybe no legal option to stop them. Otherwise, you'll be accused of some other things. Then you can raise, the bills. If you want to come here, okay, let's do it this way. Maybe it's one of the ways for the UK to check the influx of people into the UK. But by and large, if you feel you need to go there, that you must go there and study, abide by the rules. That's just my take on that. Right?
Sam?
Yes, I think, though not speaking for the British Council in Nigeria, the increment may be as a result of inflationary trend in our country, on the one hand. Number two, that to a very large extent will not serve as a deterrent for the number of people that want to take the exam. But from my personal perspective, I'm one of those who is against that exam because we're taught by the British in that regard, and I don't see any reason why we need to take English exam to be able to go to the UK to study. Haven't have the same curriculum, and some of the things we practice in Nigeria, they are the English received law and practice and procedures. So that's, they have the right, is their own exam, so they can stay standard, but that will not be a deterrent, because if you go to the various centers where these exams are taken in Nigeria, you see most Saturdays when the place is overflooded with people. People even write those exams 3, 4, 5 times before they get through with those exams. So that's the argument is neither here nor there. It's the exam, so they can set their standard for their exams.
When I saw the reports, I first thought, could this be as a result of the development in the foreign exchange? For example, in the value of naira compared to the pound, the value of naira compared to the dollar, and all of that. But I also agree with those who have questioned the need for why do we even write the exams in the first place. An average Nigerian that wants to leave the country and go to another country can speak basic English, can communicate in English. But I don't want to believe that they are preying on Nigerians' desperation to want to go abroad. Because if you look at some of these countries, they only even want the best. The IELTS is just one of it's just one of the many things that you need to do. It's not even a major qualification as such for you if you want to move to the UK, for example. There's still so many other, boxes you need to take, and it is just for them to know that you can communicate in basic English. So why is it this expensive? Why is so much, importance placed on it? And another thing is that if you check, there's a report that the waiting list of people in England who need medical attention is growing bigger and bigger. You have hundreds of thousands of people still on the waiting list seeking just medical attention. Just like here in Nigeria, if you're not feeling well, you go to the maybe general hospital, the government hospitals, and if you feel like they're not attending to you on time, you can walk to a private hospital. But in the UK, if you want to use, what I'm trying to explain is that in the UK now, it's in the news, if you want to use medical facilities now, they have to, if it's not an emergency, they put you in a waiting list, a long list, which means that they even need Nigerian doctors more than we think we need, Nigerian doctors. They need our resources, they need our brains. Why are they making these things so difficult? And I just feel like they're doing it because they know they can and they'll get away with it. And I urge the Nigerian government to look into this. Well, if we must take the IELTS, the price should be regulated and kept, at a particular rate.
Let's just say they need medical experts, not necessarily Nigerian doctors. Who says they must be Nigerians in the first? There are other African countries, other countries that are not UK based that have medical experts. I'm just speaking
particularly about Nigeria.
But all the same, let's make our country work. If our country is working, nobody will really feel the pressure to go over there and do anything. Why are people going there? For studies, really, because the standard of education over there can't be compared to what is happening around here. So this speaks to our policy makers, those who are meant to reshape what is the size of the budget that is allocated to education. And allocating is just one part of the story. Implementing into the letters is another part of the story. There's a UNESCO standard that is it 27% of the budget of a country that must be allocated to education. If we fix the deficiencies in our educational system, maybe people will not have any need to go over there. And that is for those who are going over there for studies. But some just want to get there in the name of going to studies, to study there, then they now start doing some menial job. Well, it's up to you what you do with your life, but I believe that if we all come together and do the right thing, like you said, if we do it right, then the country will be better for all of us. That's just what I say about that.
Yes, we're still talking about some major developments all around the world. One that really, got my attention is the Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia. If you watch the morning news update, you hear that the Saudi government has created or set up an investment company to pump in hundreds of millions of dollars into attracting more sporting events into the country so that they can make a lot of money from that. And if you follow the trend, you see that for a while now, they've been attracting the best footballers in the world. They've been attracting the best coaches. We have Cristiano Ronaldo now in the Middle East, playing for a club in the Middle East. You have the likes of Benzema. They even tried to get the likes of Mbappe and Messi, but of course those ones took their some other decisions there. But for me, yesterday we talked about being intentional about investment, being intentional about your economy, looking at some long-term investment plans, and this is what I see going on in Saudi Arabia specifically. What do you make of that?
Saudi Arabia has a good foreign policy initiative, and they are using sports as a driver of that development. These are futuristic countries that want to attract some level of investment, particularly through sport development, and that again will be able to sustain economic growth over a period of time. I think this is a foreign policy initiative using sport as a basis to create the future when the future has not happened. And that's my personal view.
For me, I know that behind every show there is a business. It is called showbiz. Sports is a showbiz. The rest of the world is focused on the show part of it. Saudi Arabia is focused on the business part of it. Now, there are several ways of becoming a global power, okay? One way is military option, which is no longer in vogue anywhere in the world. Otherwise, all of us will be in crisis. Let's not go there. That's debatable. But then, we have politics. The Niger ECOWAS interface is all about some people trying to use politics to dominate, control a part of the world. Then sports and entertainment are another powerful tool to gain global influence. This is what Saudi Arabia is trying to do. Before now, it has been Europe. We talk about UEFA Champions League, the Europa League, and so on and so forth. And we know how much money that those competitions attract. Now, Saudi has said, okay, let us emerge as a superpower in the sports arena. And luckily, they have the money, they have the willpower, and they have the vision to go there. Vision 2030 is just 7 years away. Judging by the rate at which they are going now, they may not even have to wait till that time before they emerge one of the global sports superpowers. This is a cue for us. We have two options. You either join that particular train and emerge also as one of the superpowers, or you watch and clap when they get there. That's just the thing for us.
Well, I just hope that African countries are taking a cue from all of this, and we are also coming up with our own long-term, investment plan, our own long-term developmental plan, so that when we meet 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we'll still not have that imbalance where you have some countries really dominating and some countries, just, at the bottom of the value chain. Well, it's time for us to go on a short break. When we get back, we'll start to talk about the main topics that we have for you today on Early Exchange. Stay tuned.
Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange on Souq News. Okay, we are back to the first meat of the matter this morning. We're looking at repositioning the public service through reforms. Different governments, successive governments in Nigeria have actually made attempts to take a look at the deficiencies in the public service sector, and they have come up with reforms to, you know, improve efficiency. I mean, replacing deficiencies with efficiency, accountability, and some other issues of corruption and so on and so forth have been on the front burner. Now, what happens to public service is when a particular government notices an infraction somewhere, a dropping of the ball somewhere, they put heads together and the think tank come together and say, okay, let us introduce this measure and this measure. From the days of the structural adjustment programs of the Babangida regime, even to this present day, we talk about even NIPPS came on board because of these lapses here and there. So today we're looking at this. What has been the state of the public service? What needs to be adjusted? What needs to be dialed up? What do we need to keep? What do we need to, you know, drop? And we are talking about this, and we'll be having a guest very soon. But Sam, before then, take an overview about the, you know, public service reform in Nigeria. How far have we gone? How well have we done? And what do we still need to do?
Thank you very much. I think the bureaucracy from time to time need to rejig its services. Is the engine room of government. Therefore, from time to time, in terms of continuous improvement, continuous learning, reform must be put in place in order to get along with global best practices and governance structures elsewhere. So these improvements are required to be able to instill efficiency, effectiveness into governance, and public policy need to be reviewed from time to time. So those reforms are required to keep in line with development partners' demand. The global ecosystem is changing, so we need to respond to those changes that occur within the public sector across the world.
I think we should begin to talk about the challenges that we have faced, you know, using public services and also with civil servants in Nigeria generally over the years. I know we've come a long way, you know, in some areas things are getting better, but there are still some major challenges. Could you please speak to that?
Yeah, there's, in every given, in any society rather, there are issues and challenges. What is important is ability to react those challenges as a result of emerging trend. I think one of the major challenge for the bureaucracy, in my view, is that because of the structure, the structural way that people get into the service, to a very large extent, the learning and development culture to some extent is limited. Even you have a lot of technocrats within the ministry, but political expediency and political balance sometimes affect service delivery in terms of the public service. But therefore, we need to constantly reform in line with global best practices so that we can deliver service for the public good.
Beyond that, I do know that political interference is one of the critical challenges of public service reform. One government comes into power and institutes a particular policy thrust, then another government comes into power and says, okay, away with that, let's do it with that, I have my own. And the government essentially should be a continuum. Whatever party is there, whoever is sitting on that particular throne, it is still one institution. That is the governance institution. But then, in this part of the world, we're not, you know, making it happen that way, because when a new government comes into power, it sees deficiencies in the previous regime's, you know, policy thrust, and it wants to, like, okay, let's do our own, which in itself is making us lose as a people, because continuity is key. Of course, you can take a look at what is not working well with the past regime, but then you shouldn't really discard it entirely. That's what I feel is one of those problems that we have there, political interference.
Yes, political interference. But when I see public service, I see a major difference between public service and civil service. Definitely. You know, for me, when I think public service, I look at it from the angle of the, you know, infrastructure or the services that I enjoy, you know, as a citizen of a country. How beneficiary are those services to me? How I see public service as the things that people can really enjoy, from the government. But I see civil service as, the people that make these things happen. The processes, the structure of government workers and how it directly or indirectly affects public service, which is the result or the outcome which we are supposed to benefit as Nigerians. So when I think public service, I think, okay, so what has been the level of access to public infrastructure, for example? So when I talk about challenges, those are the challenges for me. And some of the challenges that I have noticed in recent times are maintenance, for example. A road is built today, and in the next 1 or 2 years, you discover that the road is no longer in a good shape. And you discover that, they build rails today. Who is maintaining some of these things? And they're no longer in the shape, in their best shapes, just within a short period of time. And those are the challenges that I see in public service. And for example, I also talk about initiatives that people are supposed to benefit from. A good number of people complain that these are the public services, these are the things they see as public services. But a good number of people talk about bureaucracy, they talk about corruption and favoritism when it comes to enjoying some of these public services. So along that line, what are the other challenges that you have noticed, Sam?
You just mentioned who are the drivers of the public service. They are the civil servant. Who are the policy regulator? They are the public servant. So when you talk about service delivery, who deliver the service for public good? They are the public servant, whether you call them public servant or civil servant. So if you're talking about transportation, for example, you're talking about a railway system. There's a government department that is responsible for providing that service. So to what extent can you deliver the public good? So the challenge is service delivery. They have service standard. To what extent are these service delivery standards sustained over a period of time? You're talking about road network. To what extent do people meet standardization for building public infrastructure? So these are some of the challenges that we need to look at. The challenge is you build a public infrastructure. What extent do you meet the standardization in terms of building those road infrastructure? I think that's one of the key things that we need to examine.
All right, to join the conversation today is the Director General, Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Dasuki Arabi. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us.
Oh, glad that we have you there. Thank you for honoring the invite. Now, public service reform has been about improving efficiency, accountability, and reducing leakages, amongst others. But let's start with your own point of view. Would you say the public service in Nigeria needs further reforms, and why?
Well, thank you very much for having us. The way I see public service like you, me, and the other participants on this program. Public service is a living thing. Reforms are living things, and they have DNAs like human beings. Okay. You have cold, something is wrong with their system. You need to take precautionary measures and take drugs. So as we exist as human beings, daily we are subjected to changes and improvements. This is the same thing that I look on to the public service. Public service is an institution constituted by law to provide civil and public service to the citizens, to provide the political leadership all the support they need to provide what citizens voted them to do for them in that capacity. Now, if that is the case, nothing is permanent, nothing is constant. As we move every day, the reforms that we have initiated 20 years ago are showing us that we need to review them and look at it the other way. Let me give you an example. When we did the monetization program of the federal government, we got houses of staff of NTA and Radio Nigeria in Abuja, Garki, which were just about 2 minutes walk to the stations, sold off to the staff that were working in those stations there. We are happy because some of them became landlords. Now, 19 years into that program, we have a newscaster that travels more than 20, 25 kilometers to get to his station, either early in the morning or midnight, after or before work. Now that has shown us that we must do something to address these challenges. When we did the pension reforms, we thought we had addressed all the problems, challenges around pension reforms, and we celebrated that pension reform that brought PENCOM and pension administrators on board. Now here we are seeing other challenges associated with the pension fund administrators, bureaucracy here and there also. So reforms are constant, public service is permanent, changes are permanent, and they come every day.
You mentioned challenges now in the process of public reforms. I believe that public reforms have been on since 1988 all through to now. I have met you. I know you do trainings from time to time for people in the civil service. But what would you say is the major challenge? Are we really getting the results that we are supposed to get from these reforms, and why?
Thank you very much. You're welcome. I didn't know you're on the screen this morning. Public service reforms have worked. They are working, and they will continue to work. We've been facing challenges in implementing reforms because reforms means getting you out of your comfort zone to the stage or the position where we think you need to be. Getting you to stop the things that you are doing that are not really in a straight line, and getting you to follow the expressway from Ikeja to Victoria Island without stopping anywhere. Now, the major challenges that I have seen over the years is one, capacity of the public servants to deliver the reforms that we want to implement. When I traveled to Rwanda, I saw they have a strategy like what we have, the National Strategy on Public Service Reforms. And Pillar 4, you know, of that is the civil service reform that is driven by the Office of Head of Service. The only difference between that of Rwanda and Nigeria is the title. We've been on our own since 2004, and they came in the last 7 years. But I've seen that they have reskilled and upskilled the performance of their public servants, and they're able to get the results they want. So the major challenge to me is, how do we reskill and upskill the performance of the public servants so that they will be able to implement the strategies that we have in place? I'm very proud to tell you that we have one of the best strategies for reforming public services in Africa and in the world. But implementation has been a challenge here and there, and we're addressing those problems and those challenges. Now, if we look at reforms in Nigeria started before Nigeria came into existence during the colonial days. If we look at that to the 1999-2004 reforms, that means 14 reforms have taken place in Nigeria. What we are driving is the 14th reform, and this is a reform with a difference because it's a reform that we looked at what we call whole of government approach to reforms. Udoji was touching one or two things. Other commissions were more touching one. Now we're looking at the entire public service, the civil service, the main ministries, the agencies, parastatals of government. These are the things that we'll be doing from 2004. Okay, looking at Nigerian public service 2004 to date, I am happy to inform our audience that we have done extremely well, and Nigerians should be happy with what we have done in reforming Nigerian public service. Let me give you an example. We decided to say in 2004, we must digitalize management of resources of government. Along that line, BPSR initiated and created the Treasury Single Account, BVN, IPPIS, GIFMIS, Government Integrated Information Management System. What we have succeeded in doing there is to say that no ministry, department, or agency of government uses one single sheet of paper to transact a business or pen. We have digitalized that 100%. What has that led to? It has opened up the system. It has given the citizens the opportunity to know how much is going into a ministry, how much has been spent, and you can go even further to work with the budget office and see whether there is justification and appropriations and releases made to MDAs. And if you think you are not comfortable with that, you can say during the budget defense session, no, that money should not go to maintenance of road, it should go to provision of water. We have improved transparency because the open government portal that we have created gives the civil society and other citizens a space to see what government is doing at every point in time. When we look at facilitation of business, in 2015, we said Nigerian government needs to have one center for data documentation and safety, which is NIMSI. And now with NIMSI, we have created an ecosystem where immigration, road safety, any other agency that is looking for data, once you link up to NIMSI, you can access data of Nigerians, and you can upload data that you have generated onto the main.
You've done so well, sir. You've done so well. Apologies there, because I want to take you up on another part of the discussion. Sorry for interrupting there. Now, you mentioned the fact that one key challenge is reskilling and skilling the public service to facilitate implementation. But then there is a precursor to that, which is the recruitment process itself. How do we ensure that we rejig the organs of recruitment to ensure that we have the round pegs in round holes in the first place? It was in the news this morning. One public officer was accused of job racketeering, which shouldn't be in public service. How do we revamp the recruitment and the promotion dimension in civil service or public service, as the case may be?
Okay. Well, thank you. Whatever you try to do, there will always be challenges because there may be persons that have their own personal interests. We have what we call special exemptions that are given to MDAs when there are emergency cases for them to recruit. And I think those are the areas of contention between that officer and the committee in National Assembly. I wouldn't want to speak much around that, but you are aware that we have introduced a performance management system in public service, which took off this year. Linking that performance management to the key central agencies of government, managing human resource, Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Accountant General of the Federation, Federal Civil Service Commission. Federal Civil Service Commission is saddled with the responsibility of appointment, promotion, and discipline. We're in the process of digitalizing the entire process of appointment, promotion, and recruitment in the public service. I am confident that by the time we get the e-government master plan of federal government fully implemented, we are going to have, by the year 2030, a paperless public service in Nigeria. Once that is done, there will be no space for you to manipulate anything. The promotion examinations that are going on now in the civil service, the documentation, capturing, and all processes were done electronically. And some of the examinations are going to be conducted electronically. Interference of human being in the process of appointment, promotion is being reduced drastically. I know we have challenges, but we have improved, because you have now a Federal Civil Service Commission that you can go within a few seconds. You'll be able to retrieve your information, get access to your files digitally, before it will take you 3 to 6 months to have access to your file. This has changed, and the leadership of the public service is conscious of the time bomb we have been sitting on, the high number of unemployed youth in the country. So we are putting in a lot of things in place to make sure that the system becomes more transparent, more open. But whether you like it or you don't like it, the digitalization process will open the system that everybody will be able to see. Federal Civil Service Commission, how many people did you recruit in the last 1 year? What is the process of recruitment? This is happening in other MDAs. If you look at the recruitment, the results of recruitment that was released by Civil Defense, Nigeria Immigration in the last 1 week, virtually everything was done digitally. The application was done online, selection was done online, writing of exams was done online. Some of the agencies, even interviews are conducted electronically. So I think we're on course. We're not where we are, but I want to assure you that we, Bureau of Public Service Reforms, working with other key agencies of government, are working very hard to improve transparency, accountability in appointment, promotion, and discipline in the federal public service.
Thank you very much. We are at a point in history where we're talking about getting more money from tax. And just recently, the president inaugurated the Presidential Committee on Tax Policy and Fiscal Reforms, where a committee, Taiwo Idele, is heading. And just recently, he said that the Nigeria Customs and about 62 other ministries, departments, and agencies should not collect revenue directly. They should leave it to the FIRS so that they can focus on their primary responsibilities and they can reduce the cost of collecting tax. As someone who has led several reforms, what do you make of this? Do you agree with him?
Well, I to some extent, I disagree with that position, because FRS cannot be everywhere at every point in time. If we are trying to reduce leakages and improve the volume of revenue or taxes that we collect, I think we should create an ecosystem around collection of taxes, collection of revenues, collection of duties, where your contract with customs will be just for you to have access to your documents, which will be provided to you online. Then payments will be made directly by the importer or exporter, whoever is paying, directly into the Treasury single account. Virtually, the monies are not paid into customs or immigration's account. They are paid into Treasury single account. And what we just need to do is to see how we can create a leg for the Federal Inland Revenue Service to have direct access to revenues and taxes collected by agencies through the Treasury single account. Technically, monies are not paid to immigration. They are not paid to customs. They are paid into the federal government, a consolidated Treasury single account.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Now, talent retention is a big issue in the public service. People just stay there for a while, fine-tune their skills, make their marks, and before you know what happens, they're gone into the private sector. What should the government do? What should the public service sector do to retain talent, the very good ones, and prevent talent drain from the public service?
Thank you very much. The strategy we're driving, the national strategy on public service reforms, pillar 4 of that strategy is looking at making Nigerian public service to become more attractive than the private sector. We want to see that we have repositioned the service where you will leave Access Bank or UBA and join Nigerian civil service. One of the things that I think we need to do is to first drive pillar 1 of the strategy, which says we must have an excellent environment first, where our customers will engage us, work with us without any hindrance from any person. Number 2, that pillar says we must fight corruption. Number 3, it says we must provide the best of amenities that will encourage every Nigerian and the best brain to come to us. We have recently introduced award and recognition system, where I know you are aware last week, a lot of civil servants got awards. Some got brand new vehicles. Some are being sponsored for specialized programs based on the field they're operating in. Procurement, accountants, and others have been proposed to go overseas for specialized programs. So the whole package that is being paid to public servants, I think needs to be reviewed so that it will be more attractive for people from outside to come and join us. But you know, the economic situation of the country at a time determines what we pay out to government workers. But I'm sure, just as the president has been saying, they are going to look at the wage structure of the public service. And I know at the end of it, something wonderfully good is going to come on board. And I'm telling you that I'm very proud to have worked in the public service. And if I will come back again, I will not join private sector, I will work in the public service.
It's good to know that. And when I talk about public service, as I mentioned earlier, I like to see it from the angle of the public infrastructure or amenities that people enjoy and how the process of making these things available for Nigerians. So if we look at it from the access or the interface people have had with certain infrastructure like roads, just lately there have been several road repairs. For example, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, for example, the Eko Bridge. And one of the major things people have noticed is delays. You know, delays in maintenance. You have maintenance work that spanned a very long time. People get stressed on the roads, and people even question if the construction workers, you know, are working as and when due, if they are swift, if they even put their needs or factor their needs into the repair process. So how can we make public service more citizen-centric, more citizen-friendly, so that we can enjoy them?
Well, thank you very much. My agency is going to hold a conference that is going to be called Nigeria Customer Service Conference, where we want to change the orientation of the public servants to look at citizens as their customers. We want to change it in a way that when you enter a bank, you see how they treat you. This is how we want ministries, departments, and agencies of government to treat Nigerians that they work with and they provide service for. Now, I must commend the former Minister of Works and Housing, His Excellency Fashola, for the wonderful work that he has done. You know, it is one thing for a contract to be approved. It is another thing for the monies to be released. A budget is approved and passed January. Releases may not come until July or August. July or August is not a good time for me to repair roads, let's say, in southeast or in southwest of Nigeria because of heavy rainfall. So I think environmental factors play a great role in the delays that we see. Secondly, the chain of connectivity between the agency driving it, the ministry, Bureau of Public Procurement, the Budget Office, Office of Accountant General, and Minister of Finance that are responsible for releases and making of payments. We have quite a number of points that we need to go through. So I think, again, the transformation that we're driving around digitalization is going to definitely reduce this time lag, and we'll see a quicker response to that. We're driving a cultural reorientation program in the public service to make public servants to understand how important the citizen is, and by extension, how important it is for them to deliver on the mandate of their ministry, department, or agency. And we're hoping that you have spoken about road. We just deployed the self-assessment tool that we have developed in FEMA, who are responsible partly for maintenance of road. We are going to Ministry of Works very soon. And I'm hoping that some of these initiatives will bring changes to the space. And as the economic fortunes of the country seem to be improving, I'm sure there will be improvement in the way we work. One of the things we are driving again in our strategy is to see how PPP can be utilized in the management, maintenance of infrastructure in the country. And you must have seen where government is working with the private sector to build roads, to manage roads, to maintain roads. And we are pushing on that. And His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu mentioned that several times, and just watch us and you see how we improve in that
All right.
direction.
We'll be here to watch you and give you kudos as you implement that. But before we go on a very short break, let me just draw your attention to what you said earlier about Pillar 1 of your reform, which is to create an excellent environment. Can we say that in rural areas? Have you been to the village schools and the village clinics? Nobody wants to go there and work, and they are part of the public service. The focus seems to be on the cities and the towns. What are you doing to ensure that you implement that Pillar 1 even in rural areas?
You know, I'm not a politician, but when I'm a
but you're a stakeholder.
As
you are a stakeholder too.
A presidential candidate of APC, I became very happy because I've seen a champion of reforms that has worked in reforming Lagos public service, and we have seen it because we worked with him to reform Lagos public service. Now, what we are doing, we're approaching this in about 3 stages. Number 1, we're encouraging all states to embrace the reforms that we have started at the federal level. Remember, we have 3 tiers of government. We have the federal, we have the states, and the local governments. And we are glad to say that with the crusade and the campaign that we've done, Lagos State, Ogun State, Gombe State, and Kaduna States have kept in 100% into the reforms that we're driving. We are working with them to see that they adopt the reforms that we have started in the federal public service and cascade that to local governments and the states. I must commend the governor of Ogun State, because when we went for our programs to see how we can reform Ogun public service, working with them, he made sure that all local government chairmen were with us throughout the program, so that they will hear, they will listen, because he said at the end of this program, we are cascading this to ministries, departments, agencies, and local governments. And this is exactly what has happened. Our focus is to get the states and the local governments to key into this reform initiatives. And I must tell you that we are very proud, because these 4 states that have adopted these reforms, you can vividly see improvement in their RGP, improvement in the performance of their government. And beyond that, there is a reform initiative that is called Basic Healthcare Provision Fund. This is a certain percentage of the national budget that is paid into a dedicated account meant specially to upgrade and improve the performance and the structures in basic health facilities in the entire country. We are going to hold a conference around that to assess the performance of that fund and see how we can rejig it and get the best of results out of it. I must tell you, and I must accept this, that our focus has been federal. And in the last 3 years, we have been moving from federal to the states. We are working with the civil society groups under the FOI law and Nigeria's commitment to OGP, where we want to cascade the campaign and advocacy from federal to states to local governments, and we'll push local government administrators, governors to work and deliver on their commitments and what people are looking for. And
Thank you very much. We need to go on a short break, sir.
Between the governors, the current president, I'm hoping that there will be improvement in this relationship. Whether they come to us or they don't come, BPSR will go to all the states and knock at their doors.
Thank you very much, sir. We need to go on a short break now, but if you've been watching, we're speaking with the Director General, Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Mr. Dasuki Arabi. When we get back, we'll speak more. Stay tuned.
Okay, thank you for staying tuned. We're still talking about the reforms in the public service, and we've been speaking with the DG of the Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Dasuki Arabi. Yeah, welcome back to the second half of the show. So let's talk about Pillar 2 in your reform that you said earlier. You said you want to fight corruption in a bid to make the public service attractive, you know, to those who are there, bringing people even from the private sector. How much of fights can you put up in a system where those who are perpetrating corruption are evolving strategies every day?
You know that after 1, 2, 3 years, you need to manage and maintain 1 or 2 things. And this is exactly what we have been doing. How do we fight corruption as government or as public service? You are aware that there has been a lot of improvement in the management of the anti-corruption agencies in Nigeria. You may say there are challenges, there are problems, but if there are no reforms, those challenges and those problems will not be identified. Again, we have opened the management of resources of government in such a way that there will be no hiding place for any person that is handling resources of government. Example, public procurement, we have an agency responsible for that. It is in the process of digitalizing procurement 100%. And that process will be visible to every Nigerian that is interested in it. And if there are issues, you can electronically launch your complaint and somebody will look into that immediately. Under the Government Integrated Financial Information Management System, as an agency of government is receiving resources in terms of allocation to the agency, central agencies responsible for tracking those resources are working and watching you. And to some extent, the monies or the payments that you make in a ministry has to be approved by a process of an override by a superior authority in a supervising agency of government. So there is no hiding place for anybody that is managing resources of government. The process of auditing is almost now 100% done digitally. So auditors from Office of Accountant General can sit down from the office, audit the accounts of any ministry, department, and agency of government. So we have opened the space. There is no space for cutting corners. People can try to do whatever they want to do, but whatever you're doing, somebody is watching you. And with paperless public service, I'm definitely sure corruption would be a history in managing ministries, departments, and agencies of government.
Yes, it is often believed or perceived that there's a high level of political interference in public service. Is this true? And what are you doing if true?
Well, when you say public service is an institution of government that has 2 legs. We have a civil servant that joined in and is working in the main ministries of government. They are the persons that are called the foot soldiers, and they are the permanent workers of government that are not political, are not supposed to practice politics, and should not in any way work as politicians. Now, I have not seen the level of interference by the political leadership in the workings of the civil service. Most appointments are done into the civil service by the Civil Service Commission. They have rules and regulations guiding their appointments, promotion, and discipline. The other sector of the wider public service is non-civil servants working for federal government of Nigeria. Example, the president, the vice president, National Assembly, the judges, everybody in the judiciary, the police, armed forces, they are all called public servants, but they are not co-civil servants. When you say political interference, I always smile. The president appoints his special aides based on his interests, his agenda, and his program. This have nothing to do with the core civil service. The speaker And the Senate President can appoint their aides, special assistant, assistant or media. These are not civil servants, they are public servants. So I have not seen that political interference in any way. The only place where I see politics coming into civil service is at the point of appointment of a permanent secretary. He is a civil servant, he has graduated, he has written his exams, and the result of the examination, after all scrutiny, is presented to the president, where he says, approved, this person has become a permanent secretary. Beyond that, sir, I've not seen political interference in the civil service. In the public service, yes. When you look at the appointment of the chairman of the committee on tax reforms, this is a political decision by the president, has nothing to do with the civil service.
All right, let's leave that,
allowed by law.
Sorry, let's leave that, sir. Let me go to the complex bureaucratic processes in the public service. Things that get done easily in the private sector, when you go to the public sector, they become very cumbersome. And of course, they have their own effects, negative effects on efficiency. So how do you reform the public service such that you can streamline processes and reduce the waiting time or the complexity of getting things done?
I'm an advocate of bureaucracy. I love it. It's very beautiful. And what is bureaucracy? And the public service bureaucracy says, if the president is taking a decision, he must pass this information from himself to his minister, to the permanent secretary, to the lowest officer. In that process, you have the opportunity to participate in taking decision that concerns that. You either say, Mr. President, this is a wonderful idea, we can go ahead, or you say, this idea is good, but I think we can do this. Now, the contributions of the persons that handle those files is either accepted or rejected by the person that takes the final decision. I think what is wrong is the attitude of public servants that take advantage of the position and delay the processes. Otherwise, bureaucracy is good. So that is why, again, our cultural orientation is making us to look more at ourselves. We're about 210, 220 million people in Nigeria. All of us in the public service were about 2.7, the civil and public servants. So it's a privilege for us to be appointed out of this 210 million to work as public servants. So to me, I'm seeing my work as service to my fatherland and an opportunity for me to write my name and the name of my family in gold by doing what is supposed to be done right. And that is why, again, the conference on cultural reorientation and making the citizen the center of the service we deliver is very, very important. You are aware that we have the e-government master plan that has been approved. Recently, the blockchain technology adoption in the public service policy has also been approved. We have already commenced the digitalization of our processes in 5 key agencies of government where we use little or no paper completely. So one of the things we are driving is to say that we digitalize the process of delivering service in the entire public service. Once that is done 100%, we are going to have little or no problems with bureaucracy.
Now, we are in a season of change, I believe renewed hope, we're told. And we're at a point where the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is appointing new ministers. You know, he's forming his cabinet members. There have been screenings at the National Assembly, but this is very important to the results that we'll get from civil servants in the next 4 years, or the public services that we'll get, because this will be the leaders of some of the key ministries, departments, and agencies. What are the things that you have observed, and what advice would you give to the president and the National Assembly along this line while making these decisions?
Well, the first thing that I want to say is I'm glad that there seems to be a good working relationship between the National Assembly and the president so far. And my agency had, during the last parliament, try to build a bridge of a closer relationship and understanding between the executive and the legislature. Secondly, they have done their own bit. They have cleared them. Now it is left for the president. My advice is we should get the right persons into the right position by putting round pegs in round holes, so that persons that will be appointed to head ministries are people that have experience in fields and areas that are part of the mandate of that ministry. Thirdly, during the after the 2019 election, we conducted an induction program working with the FCDO and other agencies of government under the leadership of the former SGF, where we had a 1-week induction program for the ministers, and the do's and the don'ts were cleared out for them. And after that, the office of the SGF created or came up with this idea of delivery unit in his office and in the ministry, where ministers will be held accountable. And at the end of every quarter, they will be presenting their scorecards and their reports to the president through the Federal Executive Council. I'm thinking that this government should continue with that process and that initiative, because once that is done, approvals have been given to you to complete Lagos Ibadan Road, and after 3 months, the president will be asking you, we have given you monies for this. How far have you gone? What are the challenges? What are the problems? And you know, there's an app that has been developed where citizens can take photographs, pictures, videos of progress of work, delays, upload their practical experience, and report to the secretary to the government of the federation.
We must say thank you, sir.
That the best way for us to move this nation is for the legislature and the executive to work closely with this conscious effort and call to address the challenges of Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dasuki Arabi, the Director General of the Bureau of Public Service Reforms. You've enlightened a lot of us here and the people watching us outside. We do appreciate your time and we wish you all the best, even as you try to reform the public service. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, so we go on a very short break now, and when we return, we look yet into the public space, the public domain, and take a look at the incidents of collapsed building and the decaying public infrastructure. Where do we go from here? When we come back, we will know. Thank you.
The building industry in Nigeria is growing, but building collapse is a regular occurrence in the country, and we need to talk about this. The accident that happened in November 2021, when a 21-story building, caved in Ikoyi, Lagos, still, lingers in my memory. And since then, there have been many other building collapses. We need to talk about why these things continue to happen and what we can do to put an end to such accidents. Welcome back to Early Exchange on Souq News. Once again, I'm Olaoluwa Awe. Ayo Jimmy.
It's sad that buildings drop just like a pack of cards almost every time in our country. There was a time when you wake up in the morning, you are most likely going to see one headline of building collapse in one part of the country or the other. The case you cited, the Kuwait building collapse, where a 21-story building came down like a pack of cards, killing even the owner of the structure itself, is a very sad comment. And that's not just the single incidents. As at March 8, 2022, you had a 3-story building collapsing in Lekki, and 35 people died from that. Even in May that same year, you have one other building collapse somewhere in the Butemeta here, and a lot of people, 8 people were killed and several others injured. The whole idea is that something is fundamentally wrong, either with the construction of the building itself or with the maintenance of the building itself. You get to see a lot of houses, a lot of buildings or apartments that have been marked for demolition, and despite that, people are still living in there. People tell you that as long as there is one wrong misconception in my part of the world, in my part of the country essentially, where they say once the walls are hearing the sounds of people, the walls don't come down. I beg to differ. Several walls have come down even despite hearing the voices of people. Now, this speaks to fundamental issues of procurement, because at the level of procurement, a lot of corrupt practices take place there, and even who is supervising what building is being erected at certain times. These are many more are these things we'll talk about when we have the expert journals around.
Yes, and perhaps we should begin to talk about some of the challenges now, so that when we have the experts, we'll begin to talk about solution. And you mentioned corruption at the level of procurement. In Lagos here, the Lagos State Building Control Agency, LABSCA, is responsible for regulating building activities in Lagos. And just this year alone, there have been nothing less than 2 building collapses, one in April, 2 in April. In April, a 7-story building under construction collapsed on First Avenue, Banana Island in Ikoyi. And also April 23, 2023, a 3-story building collapsed on Ladipo Oluwole Street at Papa Lagos, but there was no reported death. So we need to really talk about this. One of the things that have been mentioned is the building equipment used. A good number of builders have complained that the quality of these materials keep reducing from time to time to time. And, we have the Standard Organization of Nigeria. We have a good number of people. I was on a program just some months ago when someone called and said, even talking about nails, talking about the iron rod, some of the, and maybe in a bid to reduce production cost, construction cost, some builders, some developers go for some cheaper ones compared to some other ones that will give them better quality for what they want. But these are some of the issues. And as you mentioned, it boils down to regulators. Who is regulating these people? How are they being regulated, so that we can ensure that we don't have more occurrences of these building collapses?
Yes, we really don't have the problem of regulation, as I would, call it.
You think so?
I think the problem is complying with regulations. Because the federal government of Nigeria has put up a lot of regulatory provisions as measures in place to ensure that this does not happen. That we don't have people bypassing what is meant to be done. Now, you look at the approval plan, that is the approved plan that every building, has. You have an approval to have a 2-story building here on your land. But what have you? Go back there after completion of the building, you have 8 stories there, when the foundation or when the approved plan says it must be a 2-story building. Would you call that a problem of regulation? Yeah. Or maybe oversight, maybe because there is a place of inspection, essentially.
Exactly.
But who are the ones even inspecting? You go there and envelopes change hands. And once that happens, people can just, look away and ensure that, you do it your own way. That's one part of the story. Yet another issue is we have lack of proper. I talked about proper, oversight and inspection. At what point do you go back there to inspect? Even when people go, when we have agencies of government going there to inspect, some people that are owners of the property sometimes have more power than the one who has come to inspect. How do you send someone that is quote unquote not relatively very connected in this country go and inspect a house that is being built by a top-notch politician somewhere? Who are you in the first place to go there and inspect? How much of access do you even have into the property when it is fenced and you have soldiers outside, in the name of security?
Well, I think when it comes to regulation, the regulatory bodies they are doing something. I'll call it something, because if you go to any major construction sites, maybe in Lagos, let's speak to Lagos, very close to us here. You either see it marked, you see a red paint, you either see it cancelled, you see comments made on the building, which means that someone has been there to inspect. But one of the things that I've heard from a good number of developers, there is a perception that sometimes when these people come to inspect, they just want to collect money. I know a developer that claimed that, in fact, that complained bitterly about the amount of money he pays to some of those regulators. And he claimed that sometimes, even when there is no need for them to have issues with your building plan, they just come and mark some of these buildings so that you can keep paying and paying. He lamented about the amount of money he has had to pay to the building regulators just to keep things running. So, and for him, that adds to the cost of building in the first place. So you begin to see some of these developers, come up with tactics and strategies to evade these regulators. You see them coming up with, and for some who have been in the business for a very long time, they just believe once you have enough money to settle those who are there, then you can build whatever it is that you build. You come to even Lagos Island here, you see all kinds of buildings that have been completed, and you wonder who even who even signed off on a building like this? And yes, you talk about these things. Yeah. So for me, I think it boils down to regulation. Where I think the construction industry in Nigeria is heavily regulated. But how are they regulated? I think it speaks to. I know we just had a conversation now on the public service and civil service. And the DG of the public service reforms mentioned that sometimes there are strategies, there are laws, there are policies, but implementation, the capacity of the people involved to implement, and the will to actually really drive these reforms is the real problem.
We even have, beyond the issue of regulation, which is like an umbrella mandate for the people who are constructing. Now, what about unqualified professionals? Have you seen the kind of people that handle buildings and constructions in this part of the world? You bring in, of course, the architect has a particular master plan that is meant to be followed. But then, even though the master plan says this is what we need and this is the level of proficiency of the hands that will work on this building, but then because of cost cutting, because of trying to maximize profit, you see the supervisors or the foreman, as the case may be, or the contractor, as the case may be, bringing in, unqualified professionals to work on it. Just do it like this, do it like that. We've been doing this before now. Why should this one be different? Whereas the demand of building changes per time. As society evolves, the need for design changes. Designs change, and then some of these, hands that are used may not be adequately educated or updated enough to latch on to modern trends and, take advantage of basic procedures that should, be looked at. So this is one critical issue. Then lack of public awareness. The public have, a lot of roles to play in this. You see something going wrong, they say, if you see something, say something. But how many people are even trained in the public to see something? When I say trained, I don't mean public training. How many of us have our conscience trained enough to see that this is wrong, and we go and, you complain to the right authorities? Even beyond that, where do you even know to go to? This comes to information sensitization. Now, if I see something Do I really know who to go to say something? So these and many more are the issues. But let's go on a very short break now, and then we'll come back. Sam will join us back in the studios to take a deeper look from the policy standpoint, so to speak, about how we can go about preventing building collapse. Then we'll talk to a professional thereafter. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're still taking a look at the incidents of building collapse in Nigeria and how to forestall it. Sam Oroje is here with us. He's a policy shaper, he's a policy talker, and he speaks and breathes the policy essentially. Now, most of the talks that people have about building collapse are basically pedestrian, except you are speaking to either policy shapers like you or professionals in the building industry. Now, let's look at the policy framework for enforcing compliance with building codes and regulations. What should a country like Nigeria be looking at with respect to policy framework for this?
Thank you very much indeed. These are technical issues, but from the policy perspective, I think the standards are there, but to what extent that those developers respect those standards. So the question here is, the regulatory frameworks are there. Those who are saddled with the responsibility of looking at those standards that are set, need to rethink their professional competence, not to compromise based on other considerations. So what is important is that government need to enforce those standards, building codes, whatever that is required to sustain the integrity of those buildings over a period of time. So from policy perspective, the policies are there, but implementation, therefore the Ministry of Physical Planning in particular, and those that are responsible for supervising those who are into the construction business must be up to speed in terms of the enforcing the rules, and once an infractions are made into the, people should be penalized and they should be prosecuted to serve as deterrent for others.
Yes, I'm exactly getting to that, because a good number of times when these buildings cave in, people die. And people have asked, you know, some of the officials in charge of this building, sometimes we just say that they've been replaced, they get dismissed. Do you think we need stricter penalties, you know, in this case? Or do you think, how do you think the government should focus more on punishing the offenders, especially because if we're going to speak to the experiences we have heard people share, a lot of corruption goes on, you know, in this amongst these regulators. So, in terms of punishing them to serve as deterrents, how far do you think we should be going at this point?
I think for me, the point of sanction should come from the professional institutes that are responsible in the construction value chain. What it means is that once engineers, quantity surveyors, anybody in that value chain have an infraction in terms of not meeting up with state standard, regulatory framework that supervise building standard, they should be punished. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, government officials within the ministry must equally be punished and should be prosecuted so that it can serve as deterrent, like I mentioned earlier. So it's on both sides. Professional bodies must sanction their members. Government, those professionals who work in government department must equally be sanctioned and be prosecuted so that you can sanitize that industry.
So let's look at, because the building sector, or the building industry as the case is dominated largely now by private, you know, builders, private firms who are going into this. You will see estates here and there springing up by the day in Nigeria. But then the government has a role in incentivizing them to keep to stand beyond punishment, because yeah, it could be a stick and carrot approach, like some people say. Yeah, punishment is there for those who commit infractions in the building industry. But then, what about the place of incentives for them to do the right thing? What can be done? Can we look into this direction as well?
Yes, that's what is expected to be done. I think the processes for approval should be looked at again once more, so that once you come to the ministry and that you want to do a construction, whatever parameters and guidelines that have been put, they must be adhered to strictly in order to sustain the integrity of the building. So the incentive here is that once you meet one requirement, you move into the other requirement, and at the end of the day, before the building is certified, then everybody that is responsible, quantity surveyors, structural engineers, they must work in harmony to sustain the integrities of those buildings. Then incentive, yes. How do government incentivize those who meet up with the requirement? Should be given their licenses, and once there are no infraction, then they should be commended for meeting up with the framework that were put in place by the physical planning ministries across board.
Yes, it is now time for us to bring in the professionals. Right now, we'll be speaking with the Chief Procurement Officer, the National Center for Technology Management, NACETEM, Olumide Akintayo. Good morning, Mr. Akintayo.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Quite glad to be here this morning.
Thank you. Now, we have been talking about the possible causes of building collapses in Nigeria, especially in Lagos. But from a professional standpoint, what do you really think we missed there, really, in terms of the things contributing to the building collapses we see here and there?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, we have observed over time that unprofessionalism and then engaging quacks instead of professionals to build these structures is the primary reason for building collapse. There are certain things that need to be done when you want to put up a structure. And then different structures require different levels of involvement. You may not need to engage a structural engineer if you are just building an owner-occupier 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. Yes, but you still need to speak with an architect and speak with probably an engineer who can just help you put 1 or 2 things together. But if we are talking about a multi-story building, 25, 30-story building, you need the best of the best. Honestly, you need the serious engagement of a structural engineer. You need the best of mechanical and electrical engineers to put this in place. But most of the time, in a bid to cut things short or in a bid to cut costs, people engage quacks or the professionals that, I mean, some who are not competent anyway. And then the result is what you get when you have your buildings coming down.
Okay. Now, when we see a quantity surveyor on a show like this speaking to building collapse, one question to the uninformed is that what is the role of a quantity surveyor in building collapse? Could you please justify your presence on the program today? What role do you have to play to prevent, building collapse as a quantity surveyor?
Thank you very much, Ayo. I said something about people trying to cut costs. When you want to build a house, even the Bible recommends that you need to get a professional who will cost what you want to build and then tell you, so you may know whether you are ready. You have what it takes to erect such a structure. So the role of the quantity surveyor in this is estimating and advising on cost. There are times, people are carried away by the beauty, and what the quantity surveyor is there to do many times is to advise, fine, you may not need this much aesthetics if you don't have this much money. What should matter to you is the buildability and the fitness for purpose of your building and whether you are capable of putting up this kind of structure. So in terms of cost, the quantity surveyor estimates the cost of what you intend to build. Then he also has the competencies to advise you on whether the cost is okay, or you may try to design something that will suit your pocket, rather than just saying, okay, let's just put something together. It doesn't matter the materials, it doesn't matter the quality of service that will go into this. So that is what the quantity surveyor does. He gives cost advice. He gives advice on design with respect, and make sure that the building is built to design, is built to cost, and is built to time.
Now, let's talk about
also.
let's talk about the building materials used. I know that there are specifications for almost everything in terms of the iron rod you should use, the cement, the sand, every major thing you want to use for building, there are specifications. But somehow builders have found a way around these things. Could you point our attention to some of the ways they try to evade using specified materials so that the regulators can look into these areas and do the needful?
All right. From the quantity surveyor's standpoint, you just mentioned the issue of specifications. In construction, like you rightly said, For reinforcement, we have different grades and categories of iron rods. Let me use that word. That's the common language, iron rods. 8 mm, 12 mm, 16 mm where necessary. If you decide to use a 10 mm reinforcement bar, which you call iron rod, for where you should have 16 mm, one is inviting calamity. We can go as low as talking about the aggregates. They come in sizes. Aggregates are what we call what is commonly referred to as gravel. But you have different sizes for different types of construction. If you are constructing a bridge, the kind of aggregates you need is different from you just want to do a suspended floor, what we call decking in the layman's language. But when you now decide to use the kind of aggregate you should use for decking when constructing a bridge, you are inviting danger. So these are areas where people think they are cutting costs. Meanwhile, they are preparing grounds for disasters. So these are just examples. Several other ways.
Okay. Now, there is a particular chain of activities before you build a particular facility, so to speak, from the design perspective to the costing that you take care of to the final building that the building professionals go into. Now, this speaks to an interplay or an interchange of expertise between one professional and the other. What is the degree of collaboration and what is the place of collaboration among experts in ensuring that we have quality buildings so that we can forestall building collapse? How much of a handshake goes on among all of you?
Well, at the moment, I can tell you categorically that there is very, very strong bonding and collaborations among all the professionals in the construction industry, which we also refer to as the built environment. There are always interactions, interchange of ideas, cross-breeding of ideas, brainstorming sessions here and there. You even have some firms that are referred to as consortiums that have all of these professionals under the same roof, working on each of their projects per time. Right from the design stage, you have the quantity surveyor contributing cost advice. You have the architects bringing in the aesthetics. You have the structural engineers telling where columns and beams should be, what will be adequate, what will be appropriate to ensure that the final product is one that is safe, that is durable, that is usable. So that is at the level of interactions, probably within the same organization. Going out of what I can call the micro entities now, even outside, you have the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors working in tandem with the Nigerian Institute of Architects, working in tandem with the Nigerian Institute of Structural Engineers, the Nigerian Society of Engineers. All of them work together. And also in government, if you get to an MDA, an agency of government that is involved in all of this, you see all of these people. For example, when you get to the Federal Ministry of Works now, you discover that in that ministry, you have engineers, you have quantity surveyors, you have architects, you have all of them working together. Even the regulatory bodies, you have all of these people, all of these professionals working together to ensure that we have a safe built environment. They don't work in isolation. That I know for sure.
Thank you very much, Olumide.
All of these bodies work together.
Thank you very much, Olumide. You work with the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology as well as Innovation. And could you just speak to our adoption of technology in building in Nigeria? Sometimes we go through the internet, we see the things they do in China, we see the innovations in the US, but a good number of times when we look around here, we still see that things are still being done the way they used to be. But are we really improving in that area?
Thank you very much. I would not totally agree that we still do things the way we used to do them. I can bet it that you do not live in a hut. And I know that the roof of your dwelling place are not is not
Of
thatched.
course.
So that means you will agree with me that we are not where we used to be. Yes, we are not yet where we can be, but then we are taking what do I call it now? Our toddler's steps, one step at a time.
Where are the
There
areas we
are
have
things that we need to
improved?
do.
In which areas have we actually really improved when it comes to building in Nigeria?
All right, thank you very much. I'll make reference to as an example, I'll make reference to the Sterling Bank building. Sorry, that will be an advert, sorry, in Lagos, where they decided to cover a side, an entire side of the building with, what do we call this now? Photovoltaic panels. What do we call solar panels? That's an innovation. That is bringing science and technology into building engineering in Nigeria. One, that is pro-green. That is, now we are tending towards green environment like we have in the countries you mentioned earlier. These are things that we need to start thinking about. Sustainable environment. And we have set our foot on that path. It's just about preaching it the more advocacy along that line, and more awareness and enlightenment, an example of which you are doing right now.
Yes, I must
So
agree with
kudos
you
to
that
Souq.
when it comes to big investors in the building industry, you see innovations, you see skyscrapers. But when we talk about the small investors, people who do 1, 2, 3-story buildings, are there little innovative ways they can change the way they do things?
Yes, there are. Talking about local content, we started infusing locally made materials, readily available materials into our building experience now. For instance, people now use the popular bamboo as a form of reinforcement when you are building low-level houses. So this will save cost, and at the same time, it ensures that you are still doing the right thing. Science and technology has shown us that there are materials we have that are locally abundant that we can infuse into development, into housing development and all of this. And government is also encouraging this by setting up institutes that where you can go and learn these things, grab the knowledge, and start applying them. My house, my personal house, was built using laterite. We only needed to add some cement to strengthen the laterite blocks. I learned in school more than 20, 25 years ago that the laterite block is cooler during the hot weather than the hollow sandcrete block that we are used to. It is stronger and it's even more durable. Having that at the back of my mind, I said, okay, whenever I want to erect my own personal building, let's do some experimentation. And that was what I did. And honestly speaking, it's a decision I did not regret. So all of these things are things that we can bring in, which has been brought into some level, but we can improve on them. Use local materials, it will reduce cost tremendously. Improve on the efficiency and effectiveness of these local materials through research and development, which also we've been doing. All of these are things that can generate employment. For instance, if we start to bring out the fiber in bamboo and start using them as a reinforcement in our concrete items of building, and at the same time using it as what we call yarn. Yarn is used by plumbers. Yarn is used by the POP technicians, those who do the plaster of Paris decorations you see. That's the thready thing you see that they put when they are doing POP. So these are the things that we can engage in. These are things that we can adopt and bring into our building, engineering, and development systems.
All right. On a very last note, I do know that practitioners have a key role to play in suggesting policy recommendations to the government at the higher level. In just one sentence, what policy recommendation would you make to the government of Nigeria to promote sustainable building and prevent the incidence of, building collapse? Policy recommendation from your own perspective as a practitioner.
More intense investment in research and development of local content for building and engineering in Nigeria, and at the same time, stricter punishment for professionals who compromise their stance on regulations guiding building and construction generally in Nigeria. Basically.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Olumide Akintayo, the Chief Procurement Officer at National Center for Technology Management, NACTEM, which is an agency of the Federal Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Thank you for coming on the show today. We appreciate your time with us. Thank you. Okay, we take a very short break now. Let's have a breather, and when we return, we'll be talking about public stewardship and governance in Nigeria. Don't go anywhere.
There was a time that being a public steward was seen as being a community servant. In fact, a good number of them are called civil servants. But, are they really servants in that way of looking at things? These are some of the things we want to talk about now. The conversation is governance and public stewardship. And driving this today will be Sam Uwurije. Welcome back to Early Exchange, Sam.
Thank you once again for having me.
Yes, essentially, to you, what is public stewardship, especially in governance?
From the simple definition of stewardship, is somebody that provides service. And that's why you address the public technocrat as a civil servant or public servant. People who provide service. That's the generic way of speaking to it, those who provide services.
Yes.
So they are servants and they operate in the public space.
And how does the operation or the activities of stewards, civil servants, determine how much trust the citizens will have in the government?
In terms of the trust level between citizens and the public servant, I think there's a trust deficit. And we need to improve on that gap that exists between the citizens and the public servant. And this is as a result of failure in delivery of the public good, or in terms of good governance. Those are the core issues. That's what the divide or the gap between the public service and citizen is as a result of inability to deliver on the public good. Because essentially, government service is to see how they bring about the common good in society.
Yes, you spoke earlier about trust. I mean, people's trust in government, and stewardship has a role to play in promoting trust. But then there is the issue of accountability. If government is seen to be accountable, then government is trusted. How can public stewardship promote or position the government as being very accountable?
I think we need to increase on what you call citizen diplomacy. The citizens need to put more demand on government to make them to be more accountable. Therefore, citizens should be like accountability partner with those who deliver public service, so that we can get better results based on the demands that citizens place on public servants.
Just recently, a United States department released a figure or released a document advising Nigeria to watch the way it collects loans from China, saying that, you know, the Chinese government might have ulterior motives, and also pointing out that some of our key key economic sectors are driven by activities and loans, gotten from China. For example, the railway sector, some key transportation and road infrastructures in Nigeria. And the key advice they give to Nigerian political drivers is to prioritize long-term goals of public stewardship rather than short-term immediate political gain. So how can we really drive this? How can we really ensure that our public stewards prioritize long-term goals over short-term gains?
I think that call from the United States of America is political. Whether we get concession loan from China for development purpose is a different ball game. So when you look at the long-term benefits, yes, that's okay. Whatever we do in the public space must be long-term, and that the public good must be uppermost in those who provide service. Therefore, it's important that we have short-term goal, medium-term goal, and the long-term benefit that benefits citizens.
Okay. Now, one of the key indicators of, stewardship is what we call ethical leadership. When you show ethical leadership as a government, you are seen to be a steward. How can we, in this part of the world, promote, ethical leadership? What is it in the first place, and how do we, entrench it in our systems?
Ethical leadership means that you must be guided by ethical consideration, particularly from the philosophy of utilitarianism, which involves that you must provide for the common good of society. So we need ethical leaders who are driven by inner strength to always promote the public good for the common interest of the citizen.
Yes, if we must talk about people driven by inner strength, like inner discipline, we must be talking about people who already have a perceived stand on what is right and what is wrong, what is ethical and what is not ethical, based on maybe international practices or the rules and regulations existing in the land. But one of the key ways of doing this is to even ensure that we have people that are very ethical come into the system in the first place. How can we ensure that at the recruitment process that we prioritize ethics when bringing people into the civil service?
Currently, we have challenge in terms of political recruitment processes. So you can always talk about the public service alone. The political side of the divide is very critical, because politicians make decisions on behalf of the public service. Therefore, ethical leadership must be driven by competence, capacity, and they must be compassionate to sustain the public good for a long period of time.
Okay, now, we look at environmental degradation. People say that if we have stewardship in governance, essentially it will promote, a better environment. It will help us to address some of the challenges of environmental degradation. At the personal level, if you see yourself as a steward of the environment, you will not throw things into the canals when there are other ways of disposing them. At the government level and at the policy level, how does stewardship, help to prevent environmental degradation?
I think stewardship is accountability, transparency. So therefore, those who are in the public space must be ethical in terms of their personal practice and promote those kind of accountability that is sustainable over a period of time so that the environment is not threatened.
Okay, now, when you say it's all about accountability, I do agree. But then, there is said to be leadership in followership. I tried to ask on this program before. Now, stewardship is not meant to be limited to government or governance. Even at our individual level, how do we promote stewardship so that we have a society where everybody is seeing himself as a steward? Because the problem is that people don't differentiate between ownership and stewardship. If you see yourself as a steward of public infrastructure, you will be more responsible towards it. If you see yourself as the owner, you will treat it the way you want. So how do we strike a balance between followership and leadership within the confines of stewardship?
I think the leadership itself has to be ethical. Therefore, followership will be ethical along those lines. So when we talk about leadership are not only those who are the aim of affair. Leadership at every strata of society, you must demonstrate leadership so that you are able to enhance the deliverable for the common good.
Then we're talking about leadership and we're talking about followership in public service or maybe in the private sector. Now, let's even, for me, I believe stewardship is an attitude. And an attitude, whether as a leader or a follower, is it important to have that humble attitude? Because a good number of people, a good number of times when people interface with government officials, it's almost from a top-bottom, relationship. Do you think there's a need to address that, and how can we go about that?
One of the hallmark of leadership is humility. So what is important that leaders must display humility, they must be accountable, they must be ethical in their conduct. Therefore, the reverse kind of relationship will exist even from the followership. So once leaders are accountable, I think followers will be equally be accountable. But followers should be place more demand on their leader so that they become more ethical in what they do.
Okay, now let's look at sustainable development, which is a key concept for those of you who are into policy shaping. Now, what is the place of public stewardship in promoting sustainable development, especially in the African continent that is bedeviled by a lot of developmental issues?
No, I think sustainable development, if you look at it from the SDGs, is important that leaders must prioritize on sustainable development. Therefore, key stewardship is required to be able to drive development to the desired result.
Okay, when you say key stewardship, in what context? Can we get a bit granular? In what areas of governance do you think we should talk about stewardship so that it can drive sustainable development? Let's go very detailed.
All right, if you're talking about governance in totality, there are 4 pillars that we need to address. You talk about security and justice system. You talk about economic opportunities for citizens. You talk about participation and inclusion. Then human development, which include health, education, and sustainable development, which you just mentioned earlier. So these are the 4 pillars in terms of aggregate development from the point of view of governance. So once you're able to address the justice system, participation, diversity, equality and inclusion, then provide economic opportunities for citizens, then human development, which is the driver of the sustainability that you talked about earlier, then everybody will be happier for it. So in terms of the governance template, these are the 4 pillars that you need to drive sustainable development.
Yes, when we talk about stewardship, a good number of people relate that to how certain public funds are allocated, how they are put to use, and to benefit all citizens. But how can we ensure that we improve on that aspect of stewardship, that is the use of public funds in Nigeria?
I think earlier I spoke to the fact that for us to enhance that kind of service delivery, we need citizens to take government to account. Therefore, citizens must be accountability partner to be able to drive those development process. So citizens must participate in governance. They must call their leader to account from time to time. Civil society groups, non-governmental organizations have a role to play to drive those process of public stewardship.
Okay, we're still talking about some governance and public stewardship. Let's go on a very short break now. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion in the studio with Sam Olowoje. Please don't go anywhere. Stay.
A lot of times, mediocrity is the order of the day. So any excellence trounces that sector and you leapfrog to leadership. Why are there 3 Ws? I mean, there may be many, but for me, these are the 3 that guided me. And the first W is what I call way power. Way power for me is how to inculcate and imbibe and explore, learn and unlearn the industry in which you are and the specific function you are in that industry. Whether you're a technology person, whether you're a finance person, whatever your entrepreneurial pursuit is, be the best in it. Show the way. Way power. Why is that key? Because a lot of times, mediocrity is the order of the day. So any excellence trounces that sector and you leapfrog to leadership. The second W is willpower. Essentially, always going the extra mile. You fall down 7 times, stand up 8. And many times people will tell you, Austin, give up this thing, you know, many people have tried it, you know, you are not suited for this. Always say, let me try one more time. Perhaps that was the secret behind the success of the electric bulb by Thomas Edison. Success is not final and failure is not fatal. It's the will to consistently plow along that counts. The third W is what I call weight power, and that speaks to patience. Patience to see the seeds you have planted grow, flourish, and become fruits, and you can reap abundantly. Most times, we rush out to eat our seeds, and as such, we deeply shortchange ourselves. So if the first W, which is way power, speaks to aptitude, which is your knowledge, the second one is attitude, and the third one is patience. In exhibiting these 3 Ws for success, what I realize is I exchange affirmation for accomplishments. It's always easy when you get like, even if you are not your genuine self. I exchange security for significance. Sometimes you get locked in your comfort zone, but you need to reach out, discover new grounds, and grow. I traded short-term victory for long-term sustainability. It's not a 100-meter dash. It's always a long-distance race. The 3 Ws, way power, willpower, and weight power.
Thank you for staying tuned to Early Exchange, and thank you also, Nukiri, for telling us about the willpower, and the weight power, which are the 3 W's that are essential for success in today's world. Okay, we're still looking at the issue of public stewardship and governance. And earlier on, Sam, you were talking about the key elements of governance, and I do know that there is a place of governance index in even what has stewardship got to play, measuring governance index, or which one influences the other?
Thank you very much indeed. To build on the capacity of African leadership and public stewardship, Mo Ibrahim Foundation put up what they call the African Leadership Index, looking at those parameters that we spoke to earlier. Number 1, security, economic opportunity, participation, and human development. So they come with indices on how to assess public stewardship, and African leaders and head of states have a prize money of over $5 million over 10 years, and the $200 yearly till they pass. So those indicators are used with a way to drive public stewardship so that they can deliver good governance. From 2007, few leaders have won that prize money, and the last index, which is 2022, on the scale of that index, Nigeria is way down the ladder. Is about number 30 of the 54 African countries that were surveyed. So it's still a tall order in terms of governance. So we need to have a mix of social security and justice system, economic opportunity, human development, then diversity, equality, and inclusion are essential elements in the governance template. So we encourage public, particularly Mo Ibrahim, a Sudanese billionaire based in the UK, is trying to drive the process of good leadership in Africa so that it can deliver what you call the public and the common good.
Now, let's talk about the relationship between stewardship and cultural or societal values. There was a time some Nigerians, had a chat about reconsidering asking some of these leaders to swear using the Bible or using other, traditional, gods or deities to ensure that they deliver on their promises. I know at some point you swear an oath to the nation and all of that. So how can we use our cultural and societal values or cultural and societal elements to drive stewardship in Africa?
I think in my personal view, it's not about the oath taking or swearing by whatever means you want to swear. It's to be ethical, it's to be accountable, it's to be transparent, it's to be open. Once you sign into the public service, or even as a politician, once you make commitments, it's important that you see through your commitments that you made so that you can elicit trust, and citizens will not believe in what you do, and that process can provide the common good. So it's not about swearing. People can swear by any means. But what is important, are you ethical in terms of the commitment that you have made to people? So even if you swear, and people have been swearing, they've been taking an oath of office, and the high level of corruption is second to none, particularly in Africa.
No, it is. Some people believe that the reasons why some certain, officials swear an oath to the state and still, renege on their promises is because going by that oath, nothing really happens. Some of them have mastered. They know their way around the law. There's a court system to bring people to book when they fail to be ethical or when they fail to do the needful. But for a good number of people, they feel these things don't work. But, for a lot of us Africans, we believe in our traditions, we believe in our culture. And they feel like we've had cases when, people will swear by this thing, and if they don't, fulfill their promises, something will happen. So, you talked about ethics. Yeah, ethics is important, but not everybody see things that way. Some people will still promise to be ethical and choose not to be. So how then can we ensure that we look for a cultural or a more, societally friendly way to back these things up?
I think culture, simply put, is the totality of practice of a people. So ethics is part of it. For me, I think the oath, like I reiterated earlier, is not important in my view. What is important is that leaders should be accountable and citizens should make their leaders to be accountable. The cultural imperatives are important, I agree, in some cases, but do we have commitment from leaders? Do citizens put their leader to be more accountable in terms of the deliverable that they were committed to during their initial campaign? Those are the issues that we should be looking at.
Okay, Olalua is becoming very African this morning, and maybe she is saying that if it is possible for you to lie to the laws, you may not be able to lie to the gods without repercussion. Well, that is debatable. Well, we'll come back to that at some other time. Now, you spoke about some economic opportunities as one of the indices of governance here. Now, when you talk about a government being a good steward with respect to allocation of these economic opportunities, okay? Now, what would a government have to do to really showcase ethical stewardship with respect to allocation of economic opportunities? To do it so that you are not biased, you are not sentimental, you are not driving nepotism, you are not allocating these opportunities based on your own political interest or affiliations. What would you have to do to show that you have this ethical stewardship with respect to economic opportunities?
I think essentially it's about transparency, accountability, open governance. The structure of governance and the processes of governance has to be open so that citizens have opportunity to be able to look at the promises, what are the milestones, what are the deliverables, what are the target line that government has made in specific sector of the economy so that people can follow through. So open governance will reduce the issue of nepotism and all the others. So once the frameworks are open, then citizens will see that government are accountable in terms of the commitment they have made to citizens.
Now, in terms of ensuring that the government is accountable to the people, let's talk about how much access the people even have to the government, especially in this climate. Some people claim they go to their local government chairman's office, they wait for long. And let's talk about access to information, access to officials in the first place. Yes, it's a Freedom of Information, Act, but a good number of times when you want to engage people in the public service, they tell you until you get the permission or until you are cleared from the top. Or they tell you there has to be just one person to speak to you on several issues. And sometimes you just want to, maybe talk to a public servant. You see this person in charge of something. You just want to have a little chat with him to know what is going on and give out suggestions on how things can be improved. How do you think we can improve in this area?
I think the Freedom of Information Act is there. What we encourage citizens to do is to see how they can activate the Freedom of Information Act. That is, and we talked about the justice system earlier. Access is based on the justice system. Do we get justice when you place a demand on public servants? The Freedom of Information Act enables citizens to have access to every information. So it's the responsibility of citizens to pull that act through by placing demand on their leaders to be more accountable. So that we help to improve the relationship between citizens and those who are in the public service.
Okay, when you say it is the responsibility of the people to make their leaders more accountable, that speaks to what I call stakeholder engagements. Okay, now, what kind of engagements are we talking about here, and who should drive it?
Citizens themselves, civil society group, non-governmental organization must make governance to be more accountable. And you have various initiatives. You have people who play in the fiscal responsibility part. There are those who work on sustainability. All these are placing government. And earlier in the program, you had the DG talking about the role of civil society in terms of reform in the public service. So we need to encourage those reforms so that public servants are more accountable. Citizens should be more demanding by placing accountability on those who are in public office from the local councils. Then you have like the stakeholder type of relationship you mentioned earlier must be sustained so that we can get people to be responsible for citizens.
Yeah, there are mild stakeholder engagement, like advocacy, having meetings and all of that, but there are also some stricter measures. For example, strike, going on strike. For example, protests. These are ways, you know, some Nigerians have tried to make government officials accountable. What will you say to some of those methods? Because for some government officials, they've seen these methods as unreasonable. Because, for example, talk about resident doctors and, you know, people ASU, you know, the NLC, the TUC, people who are now beginning to go on strike. If you ask them, they will tell you, we've written letters, we've held meetings, you know, we've had conversations, but things are still not changing. So what would you say about this?
Protests are part of citizens' right. Nobody can deprive citizens from protest. But for me, the engagement strategy from trade union must be reviewed. Strike is the last option. We know that they have engagement strategy, but they need to improve on the communication mechanism in terms of how they engage with government. Protest, very important. Advocacy, yes, you mentioned that. But then the government itself must see citizens as the people who consume their services. So in terms of service delivery, customer service, customer experience, government must upscale in terms of providing good customer service to citizens so that the issues of protest, strike will be minimized.
Okay, now, when you fail to do what is needful, there are consequences. If any government refuses to play the role of a public steward, especially in democracy, it's just under 4 years, you get voted out by the majority of the people. But beyond individuals, now what are the implications or the costs of not playing the card of public stewardship to society itself?
I think we still have a challenge. Most of those who are in the democratic space, in some literature, you call them autocratic Democrats who have not weaned themselves of the military hangover. Therefore, it's critical that for you, if you don't meet up with your political promises, then elections will come and you'll be voted out of office. But we need to step up political literacy. The level of political literacy across Africa is still very low. So we need more advocacy in terms of civic participation in governance. We need diversity, equality and inclusion, then improvement in the justice system so that people are held accountable when they make infraction in terms of service delivery.
Now, let's talk about key economic factors like infrastructure development, maintenance, and modernization. You know, what role will public stewardship play in addressing these challenges? And when we're talking about public stewardship now, not just from the public sector, also from citizens and from the private sector.
I think citizens, like I said earlier, must hold government to account constantly. So where there is a budget, even the media, who do a lot of agenda setting in terms of government policies, they need to upscale as well to see how they can put a kind of investigative journalism skill into following up on certain public infrastructure. So if government say we have approved 1 billion naira for the rehabilitation of road, XY road, then people should follow up. What are the milestones? When is the road supposed to be concluded? So that you are able to make those who are responsible for those infrastructure to be more responsive, to be more responsible to citizens. I think that's the only way we can bridge the gap between public stewardship at the levels of citizens and at the levels of service provider on the part of government.
Okay, the issue of political loyalty cannot be, overlooked in governance. A government, gets there by the voting of some people or by the influence of some people, and to whom he or she must be loyal in a particular context. And of course, there is the issue of loyalty to the state, as a which should be the overriding loyalty here. But how should you, in the bid of trying to be a public steward, strike the balance between being loyal to the state and being loyal to the powers that brought you into the space in the first place?
I think essentially your loyalty is to the state.
But you really can't ignore your people as well.
Even when you reward loyalty for helping you to get into office, then those core elements of competence, capacity must be sustained. The loyalty, first and foremost, is to the Federal Republic indeed, and elsewhere. What is important, once you have strong institution, loyalty to individual become a thing of the past. So the state, beyond state capture, the loyalty is to the state. Loyalty should be rewarded, there's no doubt about it. But when you reward people with loyalty, then they should be competent enough to deliver the public and the common good.
Yeah, essentially, we've been looking at public stewardship from the aspect or from the angle of civil servants, public workers, politicians, leaders. But let's also speak to the citizens. We're speaking at a time where, there's vandalization here and there. People vandalize public infrastructure. People steal cables. People, go to transformers and steal things. The government constructs railways. People go there and steal. So let's speak to stewardship, from citizens' perspective now. Yeah. What should it be like?
No, I think citizens should be responsible enough to see that those infrastructures are common infrastructure. They have ownership in those infrastructures. So, but government, on the other hand, equally need to do more in terms of public education, and saying that if you destroy public infrastructure, you are destroying your asset as a people. So citizens should be more accountable as well. Those who destroy public infrastructure must be punished when they are caught doing so. So stewardship, like I said earlier, is a two-way traffic. The government has a responsibility, the citizens have responsibility, but they should not destroy the infrastructure that is the common asset of the country. So it's important that citizens, from the perspective of stewardship, must look after their assets and find a way to protect those assets.
I like the dimension of citizenship stewardship as put forward by Olaoluwa there. Now, this speaks to one core thing here, which is citizenship education. Because if you are well educated, you will not destroy public infrastructure like we had it during the NSAS protest in Nigeria. Now, let's look at the age or the place in our curriculum, in our school curriculum, at which we should start, talking about citizenship education. We know that there is civics being studied, really. Is the curriculum robust enough to drive this kind of stewardship, or we need to rejig it, really?
I think, in my view, the civic education is there. What is important is that citizens must equally look at their roles and obligations to the state. Why they expect the state to provide certain things, citizens too must respect their own obligation and should be accountable to the government. So we can improve on the civic education by including things, human rights, diversity, equality, security sector reforms and all that, so that citizens can have adequate knowledge of their rights and obligations as citizens. And they must practice what I call citizen diplomacy by always making government to account. That will bridge the trust gap that currently exists.
Yes, thank you very much for talking about that. Now, let's talk about the issue of partnership, international cooperation in driving stewardship in the country. How far do you think we've gone with that, and what are the things we need to put in place to ensure better stewardship in that line?
All right, and take international agency, international diplomatic relations, United Nations, international NGO, local NGO have been up and doing in those respects, and there are a lot of sponsorship from those development partners that improve on our governance structure. So you have a lot of those who are working with the governance space with a view to improving on accountability, transparency, equality, inclusion in government. So civil society has a key role to play, and they've been playing those roles, and they'll continue to play those roles so that we can improve on governance for good citizenship.
Right, thank you very much, Sam Orobuche, for being a part of the show. I really can't believe that another 3 hours just got consumed just like that, and yet another 15 hours for the entire week got consumed. Thank you to all of you for being part of the show from Monday up till today. This is how we wrap. My name is Ayo Jimmy. I like to go and consult the law while Olalua consult the gods. With respect to citizenship education, or still watching. Ola, over to the gods.
You know, your energy kind of improved towards the end of the program.
Oh, because I'm happy we're wrapping for the week.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it gives me the thank God it's Friday vibe.
Okay.
But thank you very much. I really want to especially thank all our guests, from the Director General of Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Mr. Dasuki Arabi, to Olumide Akintayo, who is the Chief Procurement Officer, National Center for Technology Management. Also, our very own Sam Oruje here, who is the Director, Policy Research and Development, Femi Wash Limited. Thank you very much for joining us. And to the production team, from the technical department to the content department, we say thank you for making this week wonderful. Yes, our producer Bumidu is talking to me now. Thank you very much. We recognize your effort there. It's time for us to go. It's been a wonderful show. It's been an amazing week. I am Olaoluwa. I like to say, don't let anyone or anything stop you from having an amazing weekend.
Not even the gods. Bye-bye.